Good morning and welcome to Reveal's 2020 webinar series, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Kelly and I'm going to be your host for today's webinar. Our series of webinars provides insights on how to best leverage your SAP asset as it relates to your business and how each functional area will be affected by S/4HANA. Today, we are setting the stage for turning SAP into an asset by maximizing your talent. Today's webinar will last approximately 30 to 45 minutes, followed by a question and answer period at the end. Please capture your questions in the question or chat section. We will record the webinar and it will be available on Reveal's website later today under the Resources tab. At this point in time, I would like to introduce you to today's speaker, Stephen Crook. Stephen is principled and passionate supply chain and leadership development professional. He has over 25 years of global experience in delivering and overseeing initiatives for medium to large organizations. Stephen is actively involved in transforming global supply chains to deliver latent value by working with people and challenging their status quo. He frequently delivers his learnings and stories through social media and speaking engagements across North America and Europe. Stephen states there is much untapped potential in getting teams to work together. It's a shame to see that lost because people simply don't understand how to work together. With that said, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Stephen, and I'll return at the conclusion for the question and answer session. As a reminder, please feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation using the question or chat function in the navigation panel. So welcome, Stephen. I'm going to hand this presentation over to you.
Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate that. And good morning or good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm really excited to talk to you about today's topic, as it's something I've really invested myself pretty heavily into over the last few years, and with what's happening in the world around us, it seems like this is an incredibly relevant topic, more so now than ever. And there's an awful lot that we want to talk about and theorize about when it comes to people in an organization. But for purposes of today's webinar, what I want to focus us in on is, if we're going to maximize the performance of our supply chain, we're going to want to maximize how we integrate and how we connect with and how we perform as teams inside of our organization. And it's not something that's new. It's not something that's flashy, but with what's happening in the world around us, it's really coming to the forefront of our focus on how to integrate teams, given the level of remote work and tragedy in the world around us, and change and all of these external factors that are impacting us so dramatically. And so I've structured today's webinar in terms of three primary concepts, and I've labeled them as such, and you'll get a sense for why I've done that through the course of the webinar. So the first thing we're going to get into is settling into this thing we're calling the new normal. What is this? What is the new normal? How do I show up where I don't now have a, get in a car and drive to work and then be at work with my work associates and then get in a car and drive back, or get on a plane and go wherever? There's a whole new dynamic that exists right now, and learning how to be in that environment is very different and very unsettling for a lot of us. Once we understand a little bit about that, we're gonna talk about setting the right tone. So on this webinar, you might be a leader in your organization. You might be working very closely with leaders in your organization. Setting the right tone on how to be in this new world is vitally important before we can start looking at our third concept, which is establishing those high-performing teams and successfully executing in this new world to a high level of performance. So if we look at settling into the new normal, I like to call this the inward focus. Before we can start focusing our energy outward on our people, we need to take a deep look inside and see what we're feeling, what we're experiencing, what we're learning, which will determine how we show up. So self-reflection is the first thing I would say is important. Recognize the situation you don't ignore it, don't shove it under the rug, don't dismiss it. We are all profoundly impacted by the situation we're in. And yes, I choose to look at the silver lining around it. Others choose to look at it differently, and other people have been impacted far more severely than I have. The point is, we're all experiencing this differently. We need to acknowledge that there is, in a lot of cases, very deep hurt that people are carrying along with them, very deep insecurity about what the situation is. Let's recognize that in each one of us. Let's do that self-reflection. Once we have done the self-reflection, we then need to start looking at, well, how do we lead ourselves as a start? We need to be able to lead ourselves before we can lead others. So starts with just, intentionally using basic words. Figure out who you are. I know that before COVID hit, what I was as a father and as a husband and as a family person was different from what I was at work. When I commuted to work or jumped on a plane and I was in front of a client, I was that person there. And then when I got home, I was a different person here. But that's all intermingled now. So where I've got all of this kind of thrown together, how do I determine what my priorities are? What are my goals? And how am I going to effectively integrate my work and home life? Notice I use the word integrate versus that old term we use of work-life balance, right? Work-life balance to me was, I've got to determine how many hours I'm going to be able to be at the office and work so that when I'm not at the work, at the office doing work, I can be home and be with my family. And I've got to try and balance those two. This concept of work-life integration is work really doesn't stop and family life doesn't stop, and what I want to do for me doesn't stop, and what I want to do for others doesn't stop. It's all together in this big old blob. And what we need to do is sort those things out by assigning priorities as to what they mean to each one of us. And then we start getting an idea about how we need to lay that out in our everyday existence. So one of the tools that we can use is looking at our self-awareness, right? Sometimes it catches us off guard when people say, hey, I don't like that you do this. And this has happened to me. I'll sit back and go, well, hang on a second, what do you mean I do that? And so we can learn about ourselves through engagement with others. The point being that our level of self-awareness, as large, as great or as little as it is sometimes not entirely accurate. And so getting an accurate self-awareness is a good start before we can start showing up to others. And one of the tools that is a very useful tool is this thing called the Johari window. And I chuckle every time I explain the origination of the name. Some of you may have seen this, maybe not, but two psychologists, Joe and Harry, put this thing together where it's this window on how we look at ourselves. And so the short explanation of it is, if you look at the 4 blocks on the screen, we have our self-perception on the horizontal axis, and we have the others' perception, what others know or see of us, on the vertical axis. And then the breakdown on that is on the top side we have what's known, and on the outside we have what's unknown. So the easiest way to explain it is to actually walk through each block. So on the top left, we see that open free area. That means there's information that I know about me, which is the same information that others know about me. It's the information I choose to share about myself. And that's our open or free area. That's commonly known information. If I go down the axis, so I go to the bottom left, that hidden area, that's information that I know about myself, but it's information that I'm not going to share with others. So it's information that others may not know about me. that might be things that I consider personal, things that I might share with my wife or my kids that I wouldn't share with my work associates, as an example. Back up onto the top right area of that quadrant is the blind area. These are things that others know about me that I don't know about myself, and that's an opportunity right there. These are things that, the great example is the first time I was recorded presenting a presentation. I thought I was a pretty hot presenter. I can string a bunch of words together. I look pretty good on stage, and then I was recorded for 10 minutes as I delivered a presentation, and I watched back this presentation and was absolutely shocked at what I saw, and suddenly my perception of my ability to present changed pretty dramatically. I just didn't know those things about myself. My little mannerisms and habits and things that I did, the way I intonated words, how I sounded was all different from what I'd anticipated. So that's an example of what that blind area is. These are things that we ourselves don't know about ourselves, but that others know about us. On the bottom right are the things that nobody knows about us. This is what I call the untapped potential. These are things that I don't know about myself and things that others don't know about me either. Maybe I've got a budding career as a free diver. Maybe diving out of an airplane and performing acrobatic maneuvers in the air is something that I have skills in. I can tell you that if I do, I don't know about those skills because I've never tried it, and others certainly don't know that because they've never seen me in anything close to that, and it's unlikely that they will. But there's an untapped area of potential there, and certainly you can take that example and translate that into your work environment as well. So that's how this thing works. Why am I showing you this? It's a useful tool, and it illustrates the importance of being able to ask questions of your inner circle and beyond if you're comfortable, and ask them to give you comments on how you show up. Ask them probing questions with the intent of learning things that you might not know about yourself. This is an opportunity to learn and develop that self-awareness further. With my personality style, that unknown area is intriguing as well. I like to try new things. Maybe there's an opportunity there to go and put myself in situations that I might not know about or might not be comfortable about. That'll prompt learning about things that I don't know. But for purposes of this discussion, understand that there's ways to develop a greater sense of self-awareness, and this is one of the tools. So once we've developed that sense of self-awareness, how do we now take that internal focus and turn that now to others, right? I call this setting the right tone. And the first thing that I'm tickled at is people talk about this as being the new normal, and I would contend that there really is no new normal yet. We don't know what the new normal is, but we know that the old normal is no more. And so that leaves us in this kind of awkward transition phase. So we're changing. The world around us has changed. It's not what it was anymore, and it's now this thing in the future that we don't really know what it's going to look like. And so what we want to do is identify the fact that we're in a transition. And if we're in a transition, that's the toughest place to be, because you've left where you came from, you're not yet where you want to be, and you're in that really awkward kind of migratory place. There's a strategy for getting through that, and this is thanks to a podcast that I listened to with Patrick Lencioni, so I want to give him credit for this. And there's the 4 P's, which are the transitions of change. So the first P is purpose. Is when you're in this transitional phase, you need to understand what the purpose of this change is. And the purpose is important to define why you're doing this. Why? What's the goal? What am I trying to get to? Why am I experiencing this? And what do I want to get to? An example might be I'm going to uproot my family and I'm going to move from one geographic location to another. The purpose is, hey, that gives me an opportunity to maybe spend more time with my family. Maybe it's a better climate that's good for maybe some health issues, or I'm closer to family, or whatever that reason is. That's the purpose behind the transition of the change. The second P then is the picture. You need to be able to draw a very clear picture of what that looks like. Draw the end state, picture it in your mind, and whether you're a visual person or words or however you do that, but be able to be really, really clear on what the end state is that you're going for, so that you can know when you're there and be able to quantify it. Once you've got that clear picture, you then need to develop the plan, the steps. How are you going to get there? And the challenge with a plan is not to get too far ahead of yourself and start looking at 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and these things become very nebulous. Like get really near term. What do I need to do today? And then what do I need to do tomorrow? Get the wheels moving to be able to define the transition there. Once you then gotten the plan in place, now you need to surround yourself with your people. Do you want to do this alone? Because when you do it alone, it's pretty easy to kind of back out of it. Or do you want to surround yourself, with your wolf pack? Our term, your people. Surround yourself with those people, talk to them about the change, have them invested in this change with you, and that'll help kind of push you through. And so there's the 4 Ps really will provide some nice, tangible descriptions and purposes around how to get to where you want to get to and get out of this transition. So the next step then is recognizing that we're changing. We now want to get to how to navigate that. And so when you have people, so take this concept of change and now put it into your workplace. If you're going to define change in the workplace, and the change that we're talking about now might be we're going to move from working on site to working remotely. We might be moving from working on the client site to working in our homes. Maybe the change is there's some policy changes, there's some team changes that we need to consider. You're always going to get the people who are going to go, yeah, put me in, I'm good. These are your advocates, the people who are going to stand by your side and they're going to help you kind of drag this thing through. Empower them, give them a voice, help them help you be able to navigate and drive this change. Once you've gotten the empowering the advocates, then you want to look at the rest of the people. And so those people are going to be split into 2. You're going to have the people who are going to be your critics, the people who are going to be going against the change. And there's people who are just kind of hanging on, I'll wait and see. Let me see what's going to happen with this. And so the short story is there. You want to be able to educate the bystanders, give them data to help them become advocates. And with critics, you want to be able to talk to them, but you don't want to let them dominate the show. So you want to be able to give them enough to come with you, but don't give them enough oxygen so that they take over the whole group. And that'll help you kind of transition through the change here. Here's another interesting thing. People don't necessarily hate change. And there's a lot of you probably you're sticking your hand up going, I'm not comfortable with change. Here's the nuance, and this is thanks to Craig Groeschel, gave him credit on this as well. People don't hate change, but they hate the way we try to change them. And so everybody can go through the change effectively if you work with them to help get them through the change. And so one of the tools that we use is this Valley of Change, and very simply, it adds a visual component to saying that you're going to start out excited about something, but it's going to get worse as you travel down into the Valley of Change before it gets better. And having the support and having the impetus to move through that Valley of Change is going to be key through any part of the change that you want to go through. Third thing that's an important component of this is empathy. Just remember that as people, we have, now that our worlds have collided, right? Our worlds are together, this work, family, personal thing all together in one place. We no longer have that luxury to kind of separate out the work of, I'm going to move from, on my commute to work, I'm going to go from being a husband or a father to being a work person, to separate those things. What I'm going to do is I'm all together now. I'm that father and that work associate in a chaotic situation where I have to manage kids who now need to do remote schooling, and I have pets who are making noises in the house, and I have people coming to the door, and I've got to get my work done, and it's frantic. The empathy component of this is try to stay out of judgment in that, and recognize people are doing their best to try and navigate those situations. So from an empathy perspective, Teresa Wiseman did this research back in the 90s, but came up with these 4 bullets that I really like on what empathy is. And empathy is not the same as sympathy. Empathy starts with perspective taking. Just be able to see the world as others see it. So just asking questions. What's going on? What are you feeling? How did this impact you? How, try and understand the situation. Stay out of that judgment zone. The easiest thing is to say, well, geez, I mean, how could you be feeling that? I'm in the same situation and I'm making the best of it. That's the judgment zone. That's not helpful. Recognize the emotions that other people are feeling and communicate that emotion. Wow, I get that this is hard for you. I can see how that would really bum you out, right? When you start relating to people like that, you start aligning with them more closely, and you start helping them through that tough time that they're part of. I love Brené Brown and all of the stuff that she does on empathy. And this is a quote from her: empathy has no script. There's no right or wrong way to do it, but it's simply listening, holding space, withholding judgment, emotionally connecting and communicating that incredibly healing message of you're not alone. So powerful. This is not about to descend into a world of emotional intelligence and soft, fluffy stuff, but I give you this on empathy because it's vitally important to be able to recognize, as we start building our teams, that people are the core component of our teams, and we need to start realizing that actually focusing on people is more than just assigning tasks to them. We need to be able to connect with them on a level deeper than just tasks. So as we look to establishing, high performance in those teams, one of the things that's interesting here, and this is credit to Marcus Buckingham, who was able to kind of categorize what the expectations are at different levels of leadership. So if we look at our senior levels of leadership in the company, those are the people that have foresight, but really, really vivid foresight. Those are the people that can almost look around the corner and arm the company to be able to position itself and be able to do what it needs to do. And they have visible follow through. You can see that there's a methodical, intelligent navigation through the market conditions that we rely on them to do. Secondly, there are team leaders, people who are really good at communication. They anticipate the communication needs of the organization and of the teams, and they provide that psychological safety to all right, you see what the senior leaders are doing and they're running 1,000,000 miles an hour. Here's what the translation means. Okay, here's how we're going to work together to accomplish those goals and those tasks. But all of that starts at an individual level with our self-leadership. Know what you can do, know who you are, know what parts of your world you can change. Compartmentalize the things that you can do, separate them from the things that you cannot do. Separate the things that you feel good about from the things you feel bad about. Work on the strengths, supplement the weaknesses. All of that these are things that you can control in your self-leadership. So you become a better leader, the people around you become better leaders. And once we look to our self-awareness, our ability then to be able to turn that leadership and start working with people, now we're able to start orchestrating teams to be able to work effectively together. So what we look for is some model, some recipe for us to be able to pull people together and engage in healthy behaviors of a team. Now, why am I focusing on the cohesive team? Well, we have come from an environment where companies reward individual heroes. And you know, we constantly hear stories of, well, this person saved us because, you know, they pulled an all-nighter and got it done. Or, hey, this person just has uncanny skills with the clients and they just close, you know, twice as many deals as any other sales guy out there. And we're in an environment where those superheroes are acknowledged and rewarded. However, the research shows that for organizations to be able to continue to grow and be healthy, they rely on effective teamwork. Now, teamwork is a whole nother leap from being able to look at individuals, because in teamwork, we rely on individual skills, but we rely more importantly on the ability to integrate and collaborate those skills in a way that's going to be a net plus, a net positive for the organization. So when we talk about team behaviors, my go-to is Patrick Lencioni. And you know, he wrote a book called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, but more importantly, what we work with is the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team. This is a program. There's a lot to it, but the construct is what I want to convey here today, and that is that teams don't just auto-magically work well together. If you look to the data point and you look to the details, you can almost always look at teams and you can mine the specific behaviors and attributes and characteristics that either make that team successful or make the team unsuccessful, or point to a particular individual in that team that is boosting the performance of the team or dragging that team down. The benefit of that is that we can then work to make sure we address the unhealthy behaviors and we focus on the positive behaviors that get us to be a cohesive team, that then unlock all sorts of, you know, that strategic, that X factor in terms of company performance is absolutely unlocked there. So we're going to mine that for just a little bit here. So at the base of this, we call this affectionately our upside down triangle. It could just as easily be flipped, but either way, the foundational component of this is trust. Now, we can do a multi-day workshop on just trust. There's 2 different types of trust that we look at here, and the one is the trust that probably most of us know. Bob and I have worked together for 20 years, and Bob has never failed me. Every time I ask him for something, he does it, and he does it better than I expected. I trust Bob. If I need something done, I go to Bob. We call that predictable trust. Bob's performance dictates the level of trust I have with him. The challenge with that is if Bob starts not producing what I ask him to do in a way that I want it, my trust is eroded in Bob. So we look at something called vulnerability-based trust. which is the trust that I just give to you. Regardless of whether we just met each other or been working together for 20 years, I trust that you are doing the right thing. You have the organization's interest at heart. You're working toward the collective team goals in much the same way as the rest of us are. So I trust you. That's predictability-based trust. The benefit of that is that if Bob doesn't perform one time, that doesn't mean my predictability-based trust goes away, but it allows me to then have an honest conversation with Bob, and that's where conflict comes into it. Many of us look at the word conflict, and that's an ugly word. Conflict conjures up images of fiery curse words thrown at each other, and conflict could be, tones of battle and unhappiness and unhealthiness and frustration and all of those negative things. That is unhealthy conflict, and those images are perfectly relevant. But you can have healthy conflict, and I would say more than you can have healthy conflict, you have to have healthy conflict in an organization in order to mine the best ideas. All of us come at the world differently, and when we work in teams, we all notice different things and we push for different things. And so we need to have trust with each other so that we can then engage in healthy conflict with each other, which means we debate our ideas and concepts. We don't attack each other personally. The goal being that if I have a different view to what Bob has, we can debate the facts of each of our opinions, and we can come to the third level of this model, which is commitment. We can commit to a decision even if we don't agree. I still believe in my facts, Bob believes in his facts, but we've had a healthy conflict where Bob has gone, I get it. I still believe in my version, but I get why you believe so strongly in your version, and you have my commitment that I can buy into that decision that we make together. So that commitment is then achieved across, and I'm using myself and Bob as an example, but it could be, my closest 20 teammates in much the same way. You have to have the ability to engage in that healthy conflict and do that in that team environment so that everybody who has weighed in can now buy in to that commitment. Once we all have commitment, now we all agree on what our approach is, what the decision is, what the workload is, whatever that thing is, and now we can start to hold each other accountable. And notice this, I said we hold each other accountable, not our boss or our superior, our leader holds us accountable. The goal around effective teams is that we can hold each other accountable to the things that we agreed to. So that when I notice that Bob is not doing something that we agreed to, I can walk up to Bob and say, hey, Bob, here's what we agreed to. I noticed that you're not doing this. You're not going to deliver this on the date that you committed to, or it's, you don't have the right, you don't have the right solution in place, or you're not doing part of what you committed to doing. And Bob will look at me and go, Steve, you're right. But I got to tell you, I've just been loaded with 5 other projects in the last 2 days, and I just am not going to get to it. Then we can have that healthy discussion again, and we can try and achieve a recommitment, or try and get to a point where we understand, well, why did Bob get these extra 5 projects? Who's supposed to be shielding Bob from that workload so that he can continue to be held accountable? Only when we start having that dialogue and that follow through can we start achieving team results. And that's where we start achieving together as a team. And here's the thing, the team working effectively like that will be an immensely productive team. The results through the data show that cohesive teams deliver the results, deliver them better, deliver them quicker, And by the way, those teams are much more fun to be on. And people want to work on those teams. And so there's a huge untapped strategic advantage there in that teamwork. Now, I've given you a really quick overview of that. I believe very strongly in this concept of teamwork. Now, this is something that's a facilitated session with teams that goes over a period of weeks, months, and sometimes even years. But you can get the concept, and there's an awful lot of research out there and work out there, and there are companies who can deliver this program to help it in your organizations. Reveal is also a certified partner, so we can do that as well. But the takeaway from this particular information is that you want to start looking at being able to orchestrate teams more effectively. And so, wrapping up these concepts, the first point is you need to lead yourself before you can start to lead others. And I don't think I can emphasize that enough. Is if we're kind of lost and kind of hurt and kind of insecure on the change that we're experiencing, on how to balance our family situation, on whatever this COVID situation puts on us, we will emit those, I'll call them emotional contagions. Other people pick up on those, right? Those are transmitted, so to speak, to other people. And so we really do need to focus in on ourselves so that we can then lead others. And start with empathy. Just recognize that we could all be going through stuff that no one else knows about, and that stuff's hard. Let's just stay out of that judgment zone and just try and relate to people with those problems and help them work through that. Change is uncomfortable. We have to lead through that phase I call the transition phase, right? We know that we can't go back to a world that we knew pre-COVID, and we don't yet know what the world's going to look like post-COVID. But we know that stuff's changing, and we're in that transition zone. And so I encourage you to look at those 4 Ps, right? What's your purpose? How are you gonna get through that? What's the picture? Develop a clear picture on what your next state looks like. Put a plan together. Get your steps together and know how you're going to get through that. And surround yourself with people who are there to support you and help push you through that transition phase. And give them the information where they're invested in your ability to change. And then finally, I would say this is an opportunity to redefine our focus on teams. The silver lining for me around all this is I personally am excited by change. I do struggle in that transition area of change, but I do love the change, and I love the change because it's an opportunity to define a new future, and that's exciting. And it's exciting if we know how to take advantage of it. I would encourage you to look more into those 5 behaviors of a cohesive team and understand the process for putting in place cohesive teams, successful teams that can operate remotely, virtually, on-site, however they need to operate to be able to effectively drive your company forward. So with that, I want to thank you for your time today. I think I'm going to hand over to Kelly. We might have some questions that I'm happy to stick around and answer.
Thank you, Stephen. We do actually have a couple questions for you. The first question we have is, where can I find more information on the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team?
Very good. So the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team, as I said, derived from the Patrick Lencioni book. The course itself was put together by The Table Group, so it's www.thetablegroup.com. That's Patrick Lencioni's company. But the course and the behavioral education is delivered through Wiley and through authorized partners, again, as as Reveal, we are authorized partners and we're able to do that. So you can go to revealvalue.com and we can, or send us an email at info@revealvalue.com and we can certainly help you out with that.
Okay, great. Thanks, Stephen. And the next question I have for you is, this person says, I am not empathetic and I don't think that I should have to be soft and emotional at work. Do I need to be?
I love the question. Thanks for that. You do not have to be soft and emotional at work. And the purpose around identifying empathy is not to make us all soft, fluffy animals. That's not in our demeanor. It's not a prerequisite to performing. But what I would emphasize is that we're all people, and our outward behaviors are not separatable, if that's a word. We cannot separate those outward behaviors from our inner emotions. In our history as working professionals, we have been able to separate those two parts of ourselves because we don't typically encounter our family at work, and we're able to somehow separate our work from our family. In this new normal, if we can call it a new normal for a second, that we're forced to integrate those two things. And so we have to be able to understand how to identify how our emotional parts are impacting our professional behaviors and vice versa. And so I'm certainly not calling for everyone to be soft and fluffy. What I'm suggesting is that with that self-awareness, we need to grow our muscle that helps us recognize our counterparts and our associates as people with all the things that are wrapped up in being a person and trying to be able to work and be all of those other personas that we are at this particular time.
Great, thanks, Stephen. We have one more question. This is a good one. How can I engage in the teams remotely?
Yes, so that is tough, and certainly this is something that we've had to learn. In my assessment, if COVID had hit us 10 years ago, we would have found a way around it, but it would have been infinitely harder than it is now. Certainly, the digital technology, Teams and GoToMeeting and Zoom and all of these tools create such an impressive near personal experience that we're able to pretty effectively be able to work in teams. There are still some things that are missing, right? 55% of all communication is visual. And so if you can see someone, you're communicating the bulk of your message through your body language. However, it's not the same as personal. I'm a handshake guy, a hugger, and not being able to do that is really hard for me. And that's where connections are also made. What we've seen though through this time is that it's easier to be able to work as teams in an entirely remote capacity, i.e. everyone is remote and everyone's on, let's say, Zoom, and we all have equal ability to contribute to a discussion or work effort through that format. It's easier to do that than it is when you have partial in the office and out of the office, because the in-office face-to-face discussions are going to tend to kind of separate out the people who are virtual and remote. And so the only encouragement there is just recognize that that's the case and be able to incorporate people into that discussion regardless of where they are. But the short answer is that the technology is so advanced at this point that if we do focus on those behaviors, we should be able to hold ourselves to a higher standard of being able to operate within cohesive teams.
Thanks, Stephen. It looks like that is all the questions that we have today for you. And if anyone has any additional questions, feel free to reach out to us with the information here listed by phone or email. We're happy to answer anything else you have. And thank you everyone today for joining us. This webinar will be available on our website at revealvalue.com under the resources tab. You will also find all of our previously recorded webinars as well as other information, content areas like white papers, success stories, and other helpful tips and tools we offer. Our next webinar is going to be taking place October 16th, and that is turning SAP into an asset by unleashing the full potential of your supply chain. And that will be presented by Ed Ellsbury. We'll get that information out to you. It's October 21st. I said the 16th. So we'll make sure to get that correct information out to you in advance and hope you can attend. So with that, have a great day, and thank you everyone again for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.